Good evening, everyone. We are live and streaming to discuss diverse holiday celebrations. My name is Adam Soltani, and I am the former chair of the Oklahoma Conference of Churches Religions United Committee. I also serve as the executive director of the Council on American Islamic Relations Oklahoma chapter. I'm an instructor of religious studies at Oklahoma State University. Obviously, as you can see, I stay quite busy. And I'm so happy to be hosting this very important discussion tonight because as we are entering into the holiday season with Thanksgiving coming up just a week from tonight, Christmas, of course, being just in about a month and a few days from now, a lot of people are familiar with saying happy holidays, sometimes Merry Christmas, Happy New Year around this time of the year. What a lot of times people don't realize, especially in living in the United States, is that there are so many religious traditions that we need to be aware of and also recognize that around this time of the year, people may or may not be celebrating holidays at all, or they may have their own holidays that they would be celebrating. So, what I'd like to do is start out by having our special guests introduce themselves and introduce the faith tradition that they are representing tonight. So, if we could start, Chris, with you, if you would introduce yourself and talk about which faith tradition you're representing.
I'm with Risho Kai Dharma Center of Oklahoma here in Oklahoma City. It's a sect of Japanese Mahayana Buddhism, and I'm a Dharma teacher with the center. I've been with the center for 9 years now and spent about half that time working on our prison outreach program. I'm currently the board vice president and take care of all of our online communications, technical work at the center, along with many other responsibilities.
Okay. Okay. I appreciate you joining us tonight and very intrigued about the prison outreach. Is that something that you find that there's a lot of interest in people in the prison system learning about Buddhism? Are these people who are trying to maintain the practice of the faith while incarcerated?
It was a mix. We're not doing the program now. It
Okay.
went on break right before COVID hit.
Okay.
But as for the participation, I would say that about 1 to 2% of the inmates and facilities are interested in Buddhism. You've got some that have been studying and practicing for decades, and then some that are new to it as well. And I really enjoyed my participation in the program while I was there.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And the reason I ask that question is because as of late, I have been sharing with a lot of people, my students in the university, as well as people within the Muslim community, that I have, through my research, learned that Islam is actually the fastest growing religion in the prison system right now. And about 1 in 5, 20% of people who identify with a particular religion have selected Islam, and these are a mix of people who are Muslim before they went into prison and converts. So I find it to be a very interesting thing. And we're talking about diverse holiday celebrations today, and that actually plays a role because within the prison system, oftentimes people who are adhering to a particular religious tradition find it a struggle to partake in holiday celebrations and try to celebrate their faith. So that's a topic for a different time, but I appreciate you sharing that with us. And Vijaya, did I pronounce that correct?
Yes, Vijaya.
Okay, Vijaya, can you introduce yourself and the faith tradition that you represent tonight?
Yes. My name is Vijaya Malpani. I used to be a practicing pediatrician here in Oklahoma for 37 years, and I retired about 3.5 years ago. And my husband and I have been very active at the Hindu Temple of Oklahoma, which is
Mhm.
Soul Train. And currently, I am the chairman of the board of the Hindu Temple, and I also taught something called Bal Vikas, which is the enrichment of children, teaching them the values and customs of Hinduism and how you live peacefully amongst various other religions and be non-violent and be peaceful. So I've done that for 25 years at the temple. I still continue to do so.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I actually have visited many years ago the temple as part of the Interfaith Youth Tour, and I was truly taken aback at as to how beautiful it is.
Yeah,
And it honestly feels like a piece of India in Oklahoma.
right.
So wonderful to have you on the program. And I think a lot of people don't realize some very interesting statistics about the two faiths that we have on tonight, Buddhism and Hinduism. I'm going to throw out Buddhism first. A lot of people don't realize, and I actually have a really neat map that I share with my students at the university. But Buddhism is the largest non Christian religion in Oklahoma and also in about 11 states in the United States. So it's a very important and integral part of our state and our country. And then a lot of my students don't realize there's the website URL for the Hindu temple. So if you'd like to learn more, check that out, hindutempleokc.org. And Hinduism is actually the third largest religion in the world after Christianity, which is number one at 2.4 billion followers, Islam number two at 1.8 billion followers, and Hinduism at number three with about 1 billion followers, the vast majority of which live in India, but of course, as we've already discussed, live all over the world, including in Oklahoma. So Vijaya, I'd like to go back to you. If there was just a few things that you would like people to know about Hinduism, kind of like some highlight points, because we'll get into holidays in just a second. But I'm sure there are people watching this broadcast that maybe aren't really familiar with the tenets of Hinduism or the faith or the followers of the faith. Could you mention a few important aspects of Hinduism you'd like people to know tonight?
Sure. Uh, Hinduism, there is only one God. I want to be very, very clear. Even though we have several deities representing in the temple, but God is only one, the ultimate. It's universal consciousness. And you can visualize, imagine God in any form you want, or you can visualize and anything that of all the glories that God has, any different aspects are represented uh, in Hindu tradition. And the other thing is, female energy also is very much appreciated in Hinduism. So we have female deities also in the temple. Actually, they are not idols;
Mm,
they are live deities. I will explain why. And
mm,
so it gives you the freedom of thought. You can imagine God any which way you want. So Hinduism sees God in everybody and everything. For example, when we say namaste, we are
mm,
trying to say, hey, I bow to the God in you. So we
wow.
realize that we are all the same. God is one, but various ways to reach God. So
Mm,
the truth is one. Ekam Sat. The truth is one. Vipraha Bahuda Vadanti. That means the learned call it different ways. Like you can go to the mountain from a short way or you could go to the long way. Ultimate goal is to reach up the mountain, which is the universal consciousness.
mm,
So the individual consciousness tries to join the universal consciousness. So Hindu faith is the only faith that most people are seekers.
wow.
So if you see the religion, it seems like a lot of chaos and this, and there's no organized. No, because you see God in everybody, and you can visualize any which way you want. You can put your own thought into what you think it should be. So
Mm,
there's no dogma. As long as you're peaceful, every time we end a prayer with Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We ask peace in our own self, in the universe, and in the surroundings about us, like from thunder, rain, and everything. So as long as you're peaceful, that's what it matters. So God in any religion to us represents somebody that creates you, that sustains you, and
mm,
in the end that annihilates you. So the God that uh, you know that makes you originate is, we call it Lord Brahma. It's
Mm,
different from Brahman, which is the universal soul. It's Brahma. And then Vishnu is the one that sustains it along with his wife Lakshmi. And Lord Shiva reminds you constantly that this is all not permanent. So
mm,
don't fall into all this lust and this. Eventually, everything becomes ashes. So he represents that by simplicity, by living in a graveyard and things. So he constantly reminding you that your boundaries and your balances, please, come back to your center constantly. That's what it is. So Hindu trinity is Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara, which is Shiva. You want me to further elaborate, or this is good?
I think that's great. I think that's a good introduction. And definitely, I encourage our viewers tonight to look more into these faiths. Let tonight be the start of exploration. And again, HinduTempleOKC.org is the website for the Hindu temple. You can learn more. And is it possible, Vijaya, that people can connect with the temple and schedule a time to come visit?
Yes, they can.
Wonderful.
And we have a website they can connect, or they can call or email me, and we can arrange. Or if they want, come visit and see what.
Wonderful.
The thing is, Hinduism, when we say ritual, we do is all five elements in the universe:
Mm,
fire that is in you, earth in you, air in you, and space in you, and ether. So, all the five elements that you are contained in, that the universe is contained in, that's what we use as materials for what we call a prayer or puja.
mm.
So you can either do your ritual or you can meditate. So end of ritual is spiritual. So it gives you the liberty to choose what you want anytime you want. So there's not like a congregational worship. It's between you and God. You can, uh, or you can come to the temple when there is festival and then do the congregation. So it gives you the freedom.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Chris, let's move over to you. If you could give some just highlights as to what is Buddhism all about, and what do you want people to know about it? And if we could get that on the screen, we've got the website for the Risha. I'm sorry. If
You're good.
you go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, Risho Kosekai. Thank
Risha
you.
Kosekai. I know the name, but I get tongue twisted. The Dharma, I always call it the Dharma Center. But you can check out the website. A lot of good information on there. But Chris, can you give us some highlights? What do you want people to know about Buddhism?
Sure. So Buddhism started 2,500 years ago in northern India. The focus is on recognizing and addressing the causes of suffering for the practitioner and everyone they come into contact with. I have already mentioned that Risho Kosekai is a Mahayana sect. Um, so the other division of Buddhism is Theravada. Um, Tibetan Buddhism is an offshoot of Mahayana, and the biggest distinction between Mahayana and Theravada is that Mahayana is composed primarily of lay practitioners. You will find that there are some monks and nuns in certain Mahayana sects, but their focus is on the lay practitioners. Theravadan is the southern route, which developed in Sri Lanka. That's more conservative, and you're going the monk or nun route there, living a monastic life. Mahayana Buddhism is a northern route, so it went around the Himalaya Mountains through modern day Afghanistan and connected with the Silk Road trade route and spread across Asia. And so they have a perspective that you have the potential to attain enlightenment as a lay practitioner, being a householder and having a family. So, also, whenever you look at Mahayana Buddhism, they've got a concept of Buddha nature, which is similar to the idea of God being in everyone. And it's that everyone has the potential to become enlightened and to become a Buddha. And a Mahayana perspective that differs from Theravadan is that there can be, in Mahayana Buddhism, more than one Buddha in the universe at a time. Along with Risho Kosei Kai, which is based in Tokyo, Japan, if I hadn't made that clear yet. Along with them being Mahayana Buddhism, we also fall under a category called Ekayana, or one. Um, and the idea there is that we see the Mahayana and the Theravadan route as valid, um, and working towards enlightenment, but not just within Buddhism, but also expanding beyond Buddhism and being inclusive of all faiths. That they can all be valid ways of spending your time here on earth. You know, as if this is a spirit school. The idea being that the view that we all get at the summit of the mountain is the same, but there can be the different faiths are different routes up the mountain to make it to the summit. And Risho Kosei Kai is very involved in interfaith activities on the international level, going all the way to the local level. It's one of the things that I really appreciated and helped retain me within Buddhism whenever I got involved, was finding a place that is inclusive of all faiths and cooperative. It's something that I find very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Hinduism and Buddhism, two of the major religions of the world. Here are some highlights for you, and we've talked about ways you can learn more. So, Vijaya, can you tell us about the important holidays in Hinduism? I know there are a number of them, but if you could focus on the ones that are probably at the top of the list, especially if there are any that occur around this time of the year, because as I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, this is the time of the year where people tend to mention happy holidays, and especially living in a Christian majority country, I've gotten used to the idea that you probably are going to hear Merry Christmas without people realizing that it's a religious holiday. And many of us, including probably the three of us, are not focusing on Christmas as a religious holiday. If we're partaking in it, it's probably for different reasons. I have family that is Christian, and therefore sometimes we end up celebrating Christmas all together. I have children and they don't quite understand the concepts of Christmas being a Christian holiday because they're younger. So it gets complicated. But that being said, Vijaya, can you give us some insight into the Hindu holiday traditions?
Like you suggested, we have several Hindu holidays right from January to December. But the main one that falls during the month of October or November is called Diwali or Deepavali. Deepavali means row of lights, and it is basically good against evil. Most religions are good against, most festivals are good against evil. And the Diwali is like Lord Rama, who's incarnation of Lord Vishnu, uh, kills this egoistic man called Ravana in Sri Lanka, and he comes back to India. So the celebration is killing of Ravana coming back, and there was a demon Narakasura who was killed the day before. So the festival is full of lights. Then we have exchanging of sweets and family get together, and obviously there's a lot of food, but we also have lots of firecrackers that time.
Mm.
Diwali, and every household is decorated with lights, like you have Christmas lights. When I grew up and lived for the little time I lived in India, we used to have oil lamps lit all over of our rooftops. And then my brothers used to help us make firecrackers. We didn't have any regulations like at that time. So we used to make and then burn them and have really, really fun. So that is Diwali. We celebrate it in 4 days. And the
Okay.
people that are business oriented, they they also redo their books at that time, and they say it's a new year, so they close their books for the year and start again new.
Wow. Well, and it was in October, right?
It's October, November, because we
Okay.
follow lunar calendar, so it varies year to year.
Okay.
So this year it was October 23rd. Sometimes it comes as late as November because it depends on the lunar calendar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
And I
then,
can relate to that because the Islamic calendar also follows the lunar calendar.
so the other one that follows the solar calendar is in January. It's like a after like Thanksgiving, like harvest is done, and so there's a lot of celebration of food and feast, and there's bonfire, and everybody celebrates. It's called Sankranti, and it falls um, January 13th, 14th, and 15th when the sun goes from Tropic of Capricorn to Cancer. So that's the significance. And
Wow.
big celebration right from Punjab all the way to south. They call it Lodi, and Punjabi dances, bonfire, food, and stuff. And harvesting of wheat and is done at the time, and sugarcane and stuff. So it's really a fun.
Yeah. Sounds wonderful.
Yeah, the most important one I was mentioning earlier about Hinduism is there is always that we have female deity worship.
Mm.
If you see a human being is made out of, we all have a little, you guys have a female, little bit of a female gene, so you do have an X but you have a Y, and whereas I have two X's.
Mm.
The X chromosome is represented female deity, so we have in the form of Durga, which we do the 9 days in Dashera in also right around October month. We celebrate that. So women are respected, and women are supposed to be equal partners, and everything has to be shared with the women, whether it is a little investment or you doing service for the community or family. Women has to play a role, so uh, they have equal rights almost, so they can do what they want. It got lost in the middle, but the idea is to have women also take equal parts because they are called half Ardhanareshwari. That means half man, half man. Sometimes Lord Shiva is represented that way as a half man and half woman. For the other
Mm.
reason, it's 47XY.
Wow.
So women are really uh, have a great role in Hinduism.
Wow, wow. Thank you. That was very insightful. I learned quite a bit there. And I like I said, I can relate to the following of the lunar calendar because I didn't get a chance to introduce the Islamic faith, but I did mention that it's the second largest religion in the world. It is one of the Abrahamic faiths, and in being that, it shares a lot of commonalities with Judaism and Christianity. Islam is a purely monotheistic religion that believes that God is one, God is unlike any creation, and that Muslims are to worship God and follow the examples and teachings of not only what God sent in the Holy Scripture, the Quran, but also the life and example of the Prophet Muhammad, including praying 5 times a day and fasting during the holy month of Ramadan. And that was the point I wanted to get to. So, one of the holiest times of the year for Muslims is the 30 days fast during the month of Ramadan, when from sunup to sundown, Muslims do not eat or drink and focus more of their time and their attention on worshiping God and reading scripture. And oftentimes people ask me, when is Ramadan? Or I'll ask my students, do you know when Ramadan is? And I'll throw out all these answers. I say, you're all wrong because it's a trick question. It's going to change every year. In fact, when I first started fasting when I was 17 years old and I embraced the faith of Islam, it was during the month of December when the days are short, kind of where we're getting to right now. And I was like, this fasting stuff is easy, right? And then it slowly moved back 11 days a year because of the lunar calendar being 11 days shorter. So it moves backwards. And it takes about 33 years for Ramadan to go all the way around the calendar. And so when we got to August and July, I was like, wow, this is not as easy as I thought because the days got really long and it got hot. But Ramadan is the holiest time of the year. And even though right now there are no Muslim holidays during this November, December timeframe, or even into January, give it another 10 years or so, and Ramadan will be rolling around and will stick around this time of the year for almost a good 6, 7 years, including the festival of Eid al-Fitr, which is the festival of the breaking of the fast, which occurs the day after Ramadan ends. And it's a huge holiday. I kind of, explain to people it's almost like, the celebration of Christmas, whereas you're giving gifts, you're going out to eat, you're dressing your best, going to the mosque for a special prayer service. The kids love it because they get all the toys they want and all that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit about the Islamic holiday traditions. And like I said, give it another 10 years or so, and Ramadan and Eid will be rolling around to this time of year. Chris, talking about Buddhism, what are the Buddhist holidays that we need to be aware of? And then are there any that occur during this time of the year? Or maybe like, in Hinduism and Islam, you've got some that hop around a little bit. Tell us more.
Yeah, I can hop around with both of you a little bit on the calendar as well. We've got some lunar calendar dates that I'll mention in a moment. Buddha's Enlightenment Day is observed on December 8th. But what I actually had remarks prepared on tonight for holidays would go back to memorial services that are observed in Japanese Buddhism. And so what you'll see in Japan and cultural influences is that China had a big influence on Japan and Confucianism. And those are kind of guidelines about societal life and family life. And then the indigenous spirituality or religion of the Japanese people before Buddhism arrived in Japan about 1,300 years ago was Shintoism. And Buddhism doesn't really do a displacement of the local religion. It's sort of like a sponge, and it will absorb and just interweave with the indigenous spirituality. And so whenever you go to Japan now, you see this heavy intermingling of Shintoism and Buddhism. And that's the Shintoism is where you're going to see the connection and the folk tales that are connected to nature and nature cycles. And so the holidays that I'll mention are Higan or Ohigan and Bon or Obon. And the O in front of a word in the Japanese language is an honorific. And so for Ohigan, that is March 15th and September 15th. You're looking at about 3 days before and after that date. These align with the equinoxes. And then for Obon, July 15th is when Risho Kosei Kai observes it. And it ends up being about a week around there. But then if it's based on the lunar calendar, then it drifts a little bit in Japan. It depends on what region of Japan that you were in. It will be observed anywhere between early August and early September. So it varies, but there are some regional differences within Japan. Two very big concepts in Buddhism are interconnectedness and impermanence. And so with interconnectedness, and we've got the idea of dependent origination. So nothing has its own independent existence. It's kind of like a tree. If you remove sunshine, water, or nutrients from the soil, then the tree is not going to exist any longer. And it's the same way with humans and their ancestry. The Japanese people are traditionally, they do a lot of ancestor veneration. And so these are memorial holidays. You could think of them as being in a visual terms, like the veil between the physical realm and the spiritual realm get a bit thin. And then think of the spirits of their ancestors being able to visit here for a little while. And then they're able to say goodbye and see them again another time. During Obon, they have a tradition of going to the cemeteries and cleaning the headstones. Um, and I have found that being in America and practicing Buddhism, there are plenty of pop culture misunderstandings about karma. And Risho Kosei Kai, our perspective on karma, and the most basic definition is that it is just action. And specifically action as it relates to your intention and cause and effect. And so we appreciate our ancestors for going through this physical life and giving us the opportunity to be here now. And then also to focus on our practice as Buddhists in terms of purification of our hearts and minds and future generations as a way of honoring our ancestors. There's, sometimes unhealthy behavioral cycles that go on in families. And if you can break an unhealthy cycle in your family, that's a great thing to do, and gratitude to your ancestors for them giving you the opportunity to be here now. And you're giving your children down the line and grandchildren a better and more peaceful opportunity at life whenever you successfully practice in those purification aims. One other thing that I would like to mention, just in Buddhism and varying regionally outside of Japan, is that while Risho Kosei Kai focuses on the historical and eternal aspects of the Buddha, in some areas of the world, it is a character in Japan known as Kanon, and other areas of the world, Kuan Yin, that gets focused on even more than the historical Buddha, which is a female character, or in some stories, kind of shape shifting and shifting from a male to a female character. Or, well, specifically in the Lotus Sutra, it's from female to male. But anyway, there's some variation there. Let's see here. I'll go ahead and take a break there. I'm sure I can go back and talk about something else later, but
Sure.
I don't want to monologue.
No, appreciate it, and we're really just giving an introduction to the idea that there's a lot of diversity, not only in the faiths that are practiced in Oklahoma, but also in the holidays that are observed right here in our very state, which I think is quite phenomenal. And one thing I wanted to talk about next, and we would try to, move towards wrapping up the conversation so we don't get too far along, because I think we could talk about this for hours and hours. There's so many interesting elements. But one of the important things I think for the audience is, when people, unknowingly, right, you go into a store, you buy something, and especially the closer we get to December 25th, the chances of somebody telling you Merry Christmas are more likely. Now, I will say, I absolutely love this time of the year. And it has nothing to do with, right, my particular religion, because in the Islamic faith, we don't celebrate Christmas at all. We don't recognize the divinity of Jesus, although we recognize Jesus as a prophet. And therefore, Christmas is not a holiday that Muslims celebrate. But I love the concept, right, of the holiday season. I love Christmas music. Don't tell my Muslim community about that. I love Christmas movies. I think it's just kind of fun, and people seem to be really nice this time of the year. Personally, I don't have a problem, although I know that there are Muslims that don't like it when people say Merry Christmas, but I reciprocate in a nice way, and I usually say Merry Christmas too. However, I personally think it's a lot better for people to either consider the fact that there are more religions practicing in Oklahoma and say something along the lines of Happy Holidays, or if you work with someone, for example, if you're in the workplace or in the classroom or someplace where you can actually get to know someone better, ask and find out. That being said, I wanted to start, Vijay, go back to you real quick. What are your thoughts on this? Like, how do you respond if someone says Merry Christmas? do you think Happy Holidays is better? Like, what is your take on that?
I just said that to you. God is only one, but different faiths call different names, is what Hinduism says. So I have absolutely no problem saying Merry Christmas. As a matter of fact, when the children were little, they didn't know we were in Western society, and my kids are in their 40s now, and they didn't understand why it was such a hype everywhere else, not at our home. So I did Christmas tree. I did put the gifts under. I explained, and then gradually they were old enough. Said, "Mom, okay, now we understand. Even if you don't, so I took it out." Same thing with life. Why not? So most of the time, the liberal views that Hindus have is the tolerance.
Mm,
Because of the tolerance, all these, when we had so many invaders from Islamic faith came to India, please bring your culture to us. It's like you will bring a glass of, you bring milk and we'll bring sugar. Let's mix it together and live
mhm,
together. So I am really, really very proud to be a Hindu because no conflict. You do what doesn't matter if you, Jesus is equally as God as any of the Hindu gods. There's no problem. So is Prophet Muhammad. That's why India has been such a secular country. We have more Muslims in India than any other country in the world. I hope all of you know that.
mm.
I had two questions for Chris. One was, does Buddhism believe in reincarnation? Do they bury their dead, or do they have uh, cremation?
Um, as for the rites that are done after someone dies, I think that that varies heavily, depending on what country and culture they're in. And for reincarnation, there's a lot of room, at least in the area of Buddhism that I practice, for people that have a spiritual perspective and others that have a secular perspective and not religious at all. Um, we also have a teaching called the six realms, that it can be emotional states or spiritual perspective, and that we can transmigrate through those. I find that at least here in the United States that there's a great deal of variation from person to person on that perspective of reincarnation, and it really falls along the lines of if they have exclusively a secular uh, perspective or more of a spiritual one. Um, for me, oh, sorry, I got just one other quick remark on that. For
Yes,
me personally, the way I think of it is that if there is any aspect of a being that reincarnates from a physical lifetime to physical lifetime, that once you're finished purifying, that you would go back to spiritual source or oneness. And
exactly.
so this duality that we experience in the physical world is illusionary. And that when that purification's done, we get to rejoin with just the source of all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Basically, Buddhism is an offshoot of Hinduism. I have been to Bodh Gaya, where Buddha was had his enlightenment, and seen that. And I think in India, Dalai Lama, who is the major guru of Buddhism, he lives in India near Delhi because he was driven out of Tibet and India gave him the shelter. So he's in India. But as far as I know, in India, I think they have cremation, and Buddhists in India also have the thought of reincarnation. This is what
Mhm.
at, I was under the impression.
Yeah, well, our memorial services for Buddhists generally happen 49 days after death. It's very different from,
Hindus.
yeah, and the way I grew up, I actually grew up in a more of a non denominational or Baptist Christian environment where
Mm.
we would have a funeral within a couple days and it'd be open casket and everything. But I don't have anything bad to say about my experience growing up, but this was something that I felt a deeper connection to and decided to pursue as an adult. And it's given me a lot of peace about lack of control in life and mortality and different things.
Wow. Wow. And to the point that Vijay made, a lot of people are not familiar with India, especially if they haven't visited or don't have friends from India. I've been blessed with the opportunity to have a lot of close friends from India, Christian, Muslim, and Hindu friends. Oh, and Sikh friends as well. And one of the things I did want to mention is that I highly encourage people to explore the history of religion in India itself, because Hinduism is about 4 or 5 thousand years old and is the basis for a lot of other faiths, just like Judaism was kind of the start of the Abrahamic tradition. So from Hinduism, you have the births of new faiths such as Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism. And not to mention the fact that in India, you have the ones I mentioned: Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism. You also have Islam, you have Christianity, and you have Zoroastrianism. And Zoroastrians in India are known as Parsis. In fact, India, speaking of tolerance, did something incredibly cool. I say incredibly cool, incredibly unique, and incredibly amazing many years ago, when Zoroastrians were fleeing the Persian Empire and Islam had taken over and they were being persecuted. And the king of Gujarat at the time provided a safe haven for Zoroastrians to live. And in fact, here's a really fun fact for our viewers. And Vijaya, do you know the musical group, the rock band Queen? Are you familiar with them?
Who?
Queen, Freddie Mercury.
The rock band?
Yeah.
What about?
You familiar with them? You know a little bit about them?
Did they follow? I know the Beatles followed Maharishi, uh, and then
Well, we're on the right track. So Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody, one of the
oh,
other.
and Rhapsody.
Right. Right. So the lead singer, yeah, so everyone knows Bohemian Rhapsody, right? The lead singer of Queen, Freddie Mercury, his
Yeah,
name is not actually Freddie Mercury, it's Farrukh Balsara, and he was born into a Zoroastrian family. And I tell my students all the time, he's the most famous Zoroastrian that nobody knew was a Zoroastrian. And in fact, when he died, his family had a Zoroastrian funeral service for him in
I
London. So it's just some fun, unique facts that you learn when you teach this stuff at an academic level.
at the same note, uh, Poland also uh, Poland. Okay. So India has a lot of people that were, persecuted from everywhere else. So it's pretty tolerant country and tolerant religion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And before we get too far off track as we wrap up, Chris, same question for you regarding the holiday season. The whole concept of Merry Christmas versus Happy Holidays. How does Buddhism, respond to that, or what is the preference you would say for a lot of Buddhists in Oklahoma when interacting with people of other faiths, especially knowing that there is a good chance somebody's going to tell you Merry Christmas somewhere along the way.
Yeah, it's an inclusive perspective. And even whenever I've been in spaces where I question if I was, when religion came up at all, and I question if I was going to indicate that I was Buddhist, and I did, it went well. Um, I have an inclusive perspective on this, and I I feel included generally. The only time I see that people have a hard time um, is that maybe if they're coming from a family where when there's religious differences and there's hurtful things that have been said, I can
Mm.
see people still have a hard time with that in adulthood sometimes. But that is less about ultimate truth, and that's more about just finding a way to patch up some emotional wounds from uh, unskillful speech. So
Right. Right, absolutely. And I think this has been very insightful, hearing about the inclusive perspectives and the concept of tolerance. And I think that's something we all can learn from. And I think the most important thing for our viewers out there and for all of us to keep in mind is that just because we don't all follow the same religion or necessarily call God by the same name or practice religion the same way doesn't mean that we cannot find common ground. In fact, from listening to the conversation tonight, I feel like there's so much we could have in common. And, definitely, I think if the three of us got together, we could sit down and, share a meal and have a great conversation about the different aspects of our faith and how they view things. And so I hope that our viewers also are encouraged to do the same. And if you don't know somebody from the Islamic tradition, the Hindu tradition, the Buddhist tradition, or even other faith traditions, the Oklahoma Conference of Churches and the interfaith aspect of that, the Religions United Committee, is here to assist you with that. We've shared the URLs for the Hindu Temple, for the Dharma Center, and of course, we have the Islamic Society of Greater Oklahoma City, as well as about 5 other Islamic centers throughout the Oklahoma City metropolitan area that you can visit anytime. So, my parting words, and I'm going to ask our guests to give some closing words as well. But my parting words is to encourage you to take this journey to learn more about the important aspects of different religions, of the people you live with, the people you work with, the people your children go to school with. And I promise you, I have seen it myself, I've seen it in my students, and I've seen it in thousands upon thousands of people who have been a part of this interfaith movement in Oklahoma. Your life will be enriched by knowing people of other faiths. Vijaya, would you like to give any parting words tonight?
Well, now that you said all these beautiful uh, support us and educate people, that it's not only my the right way. What I tell you from Hindu temple is my way is the only right way, because unfortunately, even though I'm a physician, I had to be in the hospital for a few times, and all the nurses and everybody would come. No, you're not believing in the right man. That's why you're sick. So
Mm,
have to stop, and people have to understand that you should have the liberty to who you want to pray the way you want to, so the conversion issue in Hinduism doesn't happen, because you need to let people be and
mm,
choose what they want to be. You don't have to have like, oh, we're having a mission trip or convert all these people because they're a low caste. That has to stop. So I urge the rest of you communities, please educate your people and don't be secure like Hindus, because we are very secure. We don't insult our faith. So we are open. If you want to come, you want to follow Om Shanti. Shanti. So may peace, God.
beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. That was well said and very insightful. Chris, what parting words would you like to share with the audience tonight?
Well, our perspective is that when you recognize and revere the spiritual source in yourself and everyone that you encounter in your daily life, that is a route to a more peaceful world. And it really doesn't matter what labels or words we apply to describe these things.
Mm,
I think that the heart of spiritual messages are of all faiths are the same.
Yes.
That it's an appreciation and a love for one another.
Yeah.
And I think that we're born here to be here for each other and to take care of one another. And I think that whenever that's the objective of any expression of faith, that we will progress together, all of us on earth.
beautiful. Well said. Well said. Well, once again, thank you so much to our guests tonight for joining us. I encourage you to learn more about their faith traditions. And if we could get the URL for the Oklahoma Conference of Churches website up online, I also want to end tonight's broadcast by encouraging you to go to okchurches.org, learn more about the initiatives of the Oklahoma Conference of Churches. And because I work in the nonprofit field, I promise you this is giving me no benefit other than I believe firmly in the mission of the Oklahoma Conference of Churches and the important, very important interfaith work that they are doing. Go to okchurches.org and sign up to make a little donation. Even $5 a month, $10 a month can go a long way to support building this atmosphere of dialogue, plurality, cooperation, most importantly, love for one another beyond these barriers that exist in society. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Enjoy the holiday season for those who will be celebrating. For those who won't be celebrating, I hope you can enjoy some time off work with your family, which is exactly what I look forward to doing. So take care, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.